The first contact with the Galactic Empire had been a mistake. Commander Alex Grant, standing in the command center aboard the USS Perseverance, felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He stared at the holographic display, the alien ships, sleek, massive, and intimidating, looming over Earth's defense fleet. Earth was still young in the cosmic scale, its defenses rudimentary at best. Yet humanity had made its stance clear: resistance. It had started as a diplomatic mission. The Galactic Empire had issued its ultimatum. Either Earth would submit to their rule or face annihilation. At first, the leaders of the Empire had treated humanity's response with condescension, perhaps because the humans still had no warp drive capability to speak of. But President Charles Donovan, a man of principle and quiet resolve, had refused to kneel. Instead, he sent the fleet under Grant's command to meet the invaders in orbit, not to negotiate, but to make a stand. "We won't be bullied," Donovan had said, his voice filled with conviction. But Grant knew the truth. Humanity was facing a foe that had dominated the stars for millennia, and Earth was about to pay the price. Grant had chosen his team carefully. Men who embodied the very essence of humanity's resilience. Lieutenant David Stone, an engineer by training, had spent years working on military technology, adapting old systems with new techniques. His skills were invaluable, as humanity's fleet was an amalgamation of older Earth tech and hastily upgraded systems from recovered alien materials. No one else could have patched the defenses together like he could, making ships like the Perseverance much more than what they appeared. Dr. Marcus Hill, the fleet's lead strategist, had once been a war game theorist, creating simulations of global conflicts. His work had been invaluable during Earth's early efforts to prepare for this confrontation. While the Empire underestimated humanity's ability to think creatively, Hill was prepared to exploit that very flaw. He had already identified weaknesses in the Empire's over-reliance on AI and centralized control, a crack in their seemingly impenetrable armor. Then there was Sergeant Ryan Pierce, a combat specialist with a background in unconventional warfare. Where others saw only enemies, Pierce saw opportunities. Ways to fight dirty, ways to fight smart. His experience would make the difference when things went beyond the control of the fleet and spilled onto the ground. Grant couldn't help but marvel at his team. Each one brought something essential, something no alien empire, no matter how advanced, could foresee. In their hands, Earth's technology was a weapon, not because it was the most advanced, but because they knew how to use it better than anyone else. The first shots were fired at 1,700 hours, a direct hit from the Empire's flagship cutting through the Perseverance's hull. The bridge shook violently, and alarms blared, but Grant remained calm. He had expected this. They had all expected this. The Empire was far more advanced, with ships that could vaporize entire fleets with a single strike. But humanity had something the aliens did not: an unyielding will to survive. "Stone, can we get the engines back online?" Grant asked, his voice steady. "I'm working on it, Commander," came Stone's quick reply. His fingers flew across the console, trying to bypass the damage. "I've rerouted power to auxiliary systems. We have minimal thrust, but we can move. Get us out of their line of fire," Grant ordered. Hill's voice broke in from the tactical station. "They're adapting. Their AI is predicting our movements. If we don't change our tactics, we'll be wiped out in minutes." "Then we change our tactics," Grant said, turning to Pierce. "Sergeant, what do you have for me?" Pierce grinned, that familiar glint of mischief in his eyes. "You know what they say about a cornered rat, right? It'll fight dirty." He tapped a few keys on his console, and a schematic of the Empire's fleet appeared. "We've got a chance here. Their fleet formations rely on centralized control. If we can disrupt that—" "I've got it," Hill interrupted, studying the schematics closely. "Their control ships are key. If we can scramble their communications, we'll send their fleet into disarray." Stone's voice cut through the tension. "I can build a makeshift EMP pulse to disable their systems temporarily, but it'll only work once. We need to be ready to capitalize on the chaos." Grant's mind raced. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and the Empire had not only the weapons, but also the technological superiority. But they had never anticipated humanity's ingenuity. "Prepare the EMP, Stone," Grant ordered. "Hill, You get the fleet in position. Pierce, I need you on the ground. We can't let them coordinate their ground forces. The Perseverance lurched forward, trying to keep out of the enemy's firing range, while Stone worked feverishly to set up the EMP outside. The massive ships of the Galactic Empire loomed like shadows of death, their energy beams lighting up the void with deadly precision. Yet the humans were unpredictable. Grant watched as his officers went to work, Stone setting up the makeshift EMP, Hill issuing orders to the fleet, Pierce prepping his team for an assault on the Empire's ground bases. They were adapting quickly, but there wasn't much time. The first pulse from Stone's device hit. The Empire's fleet staggered, and their ships, once sleek and unassailable, suddenly seemed less formidable. Communications between the fleet's command ships went dark. For a moment there was chaos. The aliens, for the first time, had no idea what to do. "We've got a window," Hill shouted, his voice brimming with urgency. "Now or never." Grant didn't hesitate. "Fire everything we've got. Pierce, get your team in position. This is our shot." The Perseverance unleashed its modified weapon systems, and the human fleet followed suit. The battle was on. Grant could feel the weight of history bearing down on him. Earth's fate hung in the balance, and all they had was their creativity, their adaptability, and the sheer will to survive. As the first wave of Empire ships exploded into debris, Grant allowed himself a fleeting moment of satisfaction. They weren't beaten yet. The fight had only just begun. The battle was far from over. Commander Alex Grant stared at the flickering tactical display as it updated with the shifting positions of enemy ships. His mind raced, trying to calculate the next move. Earth had bought itself a moment of hope, a fleeting chance to strike back. But the Empire was a powerful opponent, and Grant knew they would adapt, just as humanity had. And when they did, this moment of success could quickly turn into an extinction event. "Report," Grant said, his voice steady, but his mind focused on the mission at hand. Lieutenant David Stone's voice crackled over the comms. "EMP pulse was successful, Commander. We've crippled their communications temporarily, but we're not going to get another shot like that. Their AI is already working to reroute systems. We need to finish this while we still have the advantage." Grant nodded, turning to Dr. Marcus Hill, who had been silently studying the displays. Hill was the brain behind humanity's strategy, the one who could think 3 steps ahead. If there was a way out of this, Hill would find it. "We've thrown them off balance," Hill said, his voice calm but taut with anticipation. "But they're recalibrating their fleet formation. They're not stupid. We need to hit them while they're confused, or we'll be facing them in full force again soon." Grant's gaze flicked to Sergeant Ryan Pierce, who had been readying his squad for a ground assault on the Empire's flagship. Pierce's experience in unconventional warfare had always been a strength, but now it was more critical than ever. "We've got their ground troops on the back foot," Pierce said, his tone laced with confidence. "We'll need to disrupt their supply lines. If we can take out their forward bases and cut off their reinforcements, they won't have the manpower to keep pushing." Grant considered their options. Earth's fleet, although improving with each skirmish, still lacked the firepower to take down the Empire's massive ships directly. What they did have was ingenuity. They could use the Empire's own arrogance against them. "Let's work with what we've got," Grant decided. "Stone, get ready to launch another EMP pulse as soon as we have the fleet in position. Hill, you'll coordinate their movements. We need them to think we're retreating." "We'll use the Perseverance as bait," Hill said, already setting up the fleet's maneuvers. "They'll try to chase us into the asteroid field near the Epsilon sector. That'll give us the cover we need." Grant nodded, impressed by Hill's quick thinking. The Empire was ruthless, and if they thought they had humanity on the ropes, they would press their advantage. But if they could make the Empire underestimate them, if they could get the aliens to commit to a risky pursuit, humanity might have a shot at survival. "Pierce, your team's going to need to get to their central command unit and disable their shields. We won't be able to finish them off without taking their defenses down." Pierce's eyes narrowed, a dangerous grin forming on his face. "I'll take care of that. Just make sure those Empire boys stay distracted." The plan was set in motion. The Perseverance led the fleet into the asteroid field, its engines running at minimal power to give the illusion of retreat. The rest of the human fleet followed, deliberately out of position, trying to create the appearance of weakness. Grant could feel the tension on the bridge. Everyone knew the risks, but the stakes had never been higher. Stone's hands danced over his console, making the final adjustments to the EMP device. "Ready when you are, Commander," he said. "Wait for my signal," Grant replied. His eyes remained fixed on the enemy fleet, now closing in, eager to capitalize on what they thought was a retreat. The alien ships, sleek and massive, moved in formation, each one following the other like a well-oiled machine. It was a powerful sight, and yet Grant couldn't help but feel that there was a sense of arrogance in their movements. They hadn't learned. Not yet. As the fleet moved deeper into the asteroid field, Grant issued the signal. Now. The EMP pulse from Stone's device shot out, the wave of energy rippling across the empty expanse of space. For a split second, the Empire's fleet staggered. Their automated targeting systems went blind. Communications were cut. Chaos reigned. "Now's our chance," Hill shouted, his eyes burning with the excitement of the moment. "Move in." Human ships, modified with salvaged alien technology, burst out of the asteroid field, firing on all cylinders. The Empire's fleet had no time to react. The first salvo of human weapons pierced the outer hull of one of the enemy dreadnoughts, throwing the ship off course. It was the first real blow humanity had landed, and it felt like the beginning of something more. Pierce's squad was already on the move, boarding one of the Empire's ground transports. They made their way through the hull of the ship, navigating through darkened corridors, always staying a step ahead of the enemy. Pierce's team moved like shadows, striking swiftly and silently, cutting down any alien troops that stood in their way. The Empire soldiers had never encountered tactics like these. This was guerrilla warfare on an entirely new scale. Meanwhile, Grant coordinated the final push. The Empire's fleet, still reeling from the EMP disruption, was now vulnerable. The human ships had adapted faster than their enemies expected. They had fought with creativity, using the asteroid field to hide their movements, then luring the enemy into a trap. But Grant knew it wasn't over. The Empire would strike back with everything they had. There was no room for error now. The first of the Empire's warships began to break formation, attempting to regroup and retaliate. But the humans had already anticipated this move. The Perseverance and its accompanying fleet launched a second EMP burst, this one aimed at disabling the enemy's shields long enough for a final, devastating assault. The enemy dreadnoughts shuddered as their shields faltered. Stone's voice came through the comms, tinged with satisfaction. "Their shields are down. They can't hold for long." Grant's heart raced. This was it, the moment where humanity's ingenuity would either secure their future or seal their doom. "Now fire everything," Grant commanded. The human fleet unleashed everything they had. The Empire's ships, so confident just hours before, were torn apart by an onslaught of energy blasts. One after another, the alien ships exploded, their forms disintegrating into the vacuum of space. Grant could see the shock in the eyes of the remaining Empire soldiers, their arrogance giving way to desperation. As the last of the enemy ships disintegrated, a hush fell over the bridge of the Perseverance. The fight wasn't over yet, but humanity had just delivered a blow that no one had expected. Grant allowed himself a brief moment of relief, but in the back of his mind, he knew that this was only the beginning. The silence in the aftermath of the battle was deafening. The star-filled expanse stretched before Commander Alex Grant, every flicker of distant light serving as a grim reminder of the battle they had just fought. The human fleet, battered but victorious, drifted in the cold void, its ships damaged but still functional. The Empire's armada, once so overwhelming in its size and might, had been reduced to scattered debris. Yet Grant knew this wasn't the end. It couldn't be. "Report," he said, his voice steady, though his mind churned with 1,000 concerns. Lieutenant David Stone, sitting hunched over his console, was the first to speak. "We've crippled their fleet, Commander. Most of their ships are either destroyed or fleeing, but there are still remnants out there, stragglers regrouping. They're not going to let this go." Grant turned his attention to the display in front of him. Sure enough, several ships, much smaller but still formidable, had broken off from the main force. The aliens were gathering their strength for a counteroffensive. They were far from finished. Humanity's victory, though sweet, was fleeting. "We need to take them out before they can regroup," Grant said. His eyes narrowed. He glanced toward Dr. Marcus Hill, who had been observing the data silently. The strategist's mind was always racing, calculating, predicting. "They'll be back," Hill said quietly, his fingers tapping thoughtfully on the console. "The Empire doesn't bow out after a loss like this. They're too proud, too focused on their domination. They'll regroup, just like us. And when they do, they'll be even more dangerous." "I agree," Grant said, his jaw tightening. "We can't afford to let them recover. It's time to finish this for good." The decision had been made. There was no turning back. The Empire had underestimated humanity, but they were about to learn that humanity was no longer a species to be ignored. They were fighters, innovators, and above all, survivors. Grant turned to Sergeant Ryan Pierce, who had been organizing the ground operations. Pierce had led successful raids on the Empire's command centers during the previous battle, but this time, things would be different. The final blow would need to come from the ground as much as the stars. "Sergeant," Grant said, locking eyes with him, "we need to disable their command hub. If we take out their leadership, their forces will fracture. Their centralized control will collapse." Pierce's lips curled into a grim smile. "I'll get it done. You know how we do it. Fast, dirty, and relentless." Stone stood, his fingers flying across the console. "I've analyzed their remaining fleet. Their flagship is still operational. It's heavily protected, but if we can infiltrate their command systems, I can disable their weapons, their shields, everything." Hill's voice cut through the air. "It's a long shot, but we can do it. The Empire is reeling from our last strike. They're not ready for a second wave. We just need to catch them off guard." The plan was set. A small strike team would infiltrate the Empire's flagship, while the Perseverance and the fleet would provide a distraction, drawing the enemy's attention away long enough for the ground team to strike. Pierce would lead the team, using the chaos of battle to slip past enemy defenses. Stone, from the ship, would hack into the flagship systems, using the EMP technology they had reverse-engineered from the Empire's own tech. As the strike team prepared, Pierce checked his gear, his mind already on the mission. There was no room for error. If they failed, the Empire would regroup and destroy everything humanity had fought for. "This is it," Pierce muttered to himself, securing his blaster and glancing over his team, grizzled veterans who had been with him through countless operations. They understood the risks, but they also understood the stakes. Grant stood on the bridge of the Perseverance, watching the strike unfold. The battle was still raging, but humanity's fleet, though outnumbered, was now holding its ground. The Empire's fleet was in disarray, distracted, scrambling to defend against the unrelenting human tactics. Stone worked quickly, tapping commands into his console. "I've breached their systems," he said, his voice calm but tinged with urgency. "I've got control over their shield protocols. I'm disabling them now." The bridge shuddered as the Perseverance fired once more, a concentrated burst of energy aimed at the Empire's flagship. The alien ship's shields flickered, faltering under the assault. Stone's hacking worked in tandem with the firepower. It was a moment of perfect synchronization. The flagship, so mighty just a day before, was now vulnerable. "Pierce, you're up," Grant said into the comms. Pierce's voice came back, low and determined. "We're in position. We're making our move now." The strike team moved swiftly, slipping past enemy lines with precision. Pierce led the way, his team staying close, moving like shadows through the enemy ship's corridors. They encountered resistance, of course. The Empire wasn't going to let them waltz in unchallenged. But Pierce and his team were relentless. With each door they breached, with each alien soldier they took down, the Empire's once unbreakable grip on their flagship began to crumble. Inside the command center of the Empire ship, Pierce's team reached their goal, the central control room, the heart of their operations. Pierce signaled his team to spread out. "Plant the charges," he ordered. "We've got one shot at this." As the team set up explosives and prepared the final strike, Pierce stood by the command console, watching the countdown ticking away. Their mission was simple: destroy the flagship's control center, cripple their command, and leave them without the leadership to mount a counterattack. Back on the Perseverance, Grant watched, waiting. The tension was palpable. The battle outside was winding down, but the real war would be decided here, on this ship. If Pierce's team succeeded, it would be the final blow to the Empire. If they failed, the thought was too horrible to entertain. Suddenly, Pierce's voice crackled over the comms. "Charges are set. We're getting out." "Do it," Grant said, his voice taut with anticipation. In an instant, the flagship exploded, the force of the blast tearing through the heart of the Empire's command center. The explosion lit up the void like a supernova, sending shockwaves through the remaining Empire fleet. The enemy's command collapsed. Grant's voice was steady as he spoke. "The battle's won. We've done it." But as he looked at the wreckage of the Empire's fleet, he couldn't shake the feeling that this victory was not an end. It was a beginning. Humanity had just proven its strength, its adaptability, its creativity. The galaxy would remember. And if any other empire thought to test Earth's resolve, they would learn the same lesson. In the end, it wasn't just technology or firepower that won the day. It was humanity's relentless will to survive. And that was something no alien empire could ever defeat.